Basically, I think they're great cameras, but the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's a pretty clickbaity title. Well, the ugly V, you might say, is it the Red fanboys on reduser.com, or is it the startup times of their cameras, or the Obsolescence Obsolete marketing campaign? Okay, so contrary to how that intro might have sounded, I actually love Red cameras, and now I've been using them for around 10 years, which is why I wanted to do this video. Now, when I say 10 years, I got my first one in 2018, but had kind of been using them renting or working on projects that they were on. So be kind of coming familiar with them in that period. Let me just run through a bit of background context of how I first came to own my first Red. So as far as my camera journey goes, and this is gonna show how much of an old bastard I am, I started on mini DV, classic VX 2000 era. Then I went to HDV. While I was at uni, I was using Sony HDV cameras and the Panasonic P2, so the HVX 202 camera. I had a V1P at that time. And right around the time I was finishing uni, the 5D started to make waves. Actually, I think it was a Nikon D90 at the time, which was the first one to kind of have that video feature. I think they came out with a 720p camera, and then the 5D Mark II was the one that really hit and changed everything, to be honest. So I switched from having a fully fledged camcorder style camera, the Sony V1P, to using a Canon 5D Mark II. And I couldn't have been happier with the image at the time, to be honest. It was miles ahead of those HDV camcorders I was using. And the first time I'd been able to get depth of field and kind of this rich depth in my shots. It's a pretty cool time. I went through a few others, Panasonic GH4, cameras in that kind of I guess trying to have one of the better SLRs with video capabilities on the market at the time. And slow motion was always a pretty big thing for me, shooting a lot of underwater stuff, a lot of action sports and documentary. I really loved the higher frame rate. So I guess I was always gravitating towards the camera that had the best high frame rates at an affordable price on the market. So, you know, I love things like the GH4 coming out with, I think it was 96 frames in 1080p, stuff like that. And being kind of in that surf and documentary and lifestyle kind of industry, shooting a lot of sports and things like that at the time, the Reds started to really capture people's attention because they were just day and night ahead of the competition in terms of what they offered, especially spec-wise from a frame rate and resolution kind of aspect. So when I first started hearing about the Reds, there's a few people in the surf industry who had them, but they were definitely way out of my price range. So I think my first pretty legit kind of nowadays comparable camera was the FS7, which was my workhorse for a couple of years, I think kind of 2014 to 2017 kind of era. And yeah, like I said, I got to use Reds a couple of times in that period and loved them. Would have loved to own one myself, but just couldn't justify it financially. Around 2017, 2018, my FS7 got written off on a shoot. Got some salt water, got into the vents and cooked it pretty much instantly. Not in an underwater housing or surf related, funnily enough. And anyway, luckily it was insured. And by that point, I'd used the camera for a couple of years. And although I'd been pretty happy with it, I guess I was never completely happy with the color science. And especially at that point in time, S-Log 3 was so hard to grade. You could get there in the end, but it was hard work, and it was so easy to underexpose your shadows, or it seemed like there just was very minimal tolerance for, if you didn't nail your exposure, it was really hard to get the result you wanted. So anyway, fast forward, the insurance money that I get from that camera, I'm able to ultimately put towards a second-hand red, which I didn't realize was going to be an option I would have. But by that point in time, second-hand epics had finally started to hit an affordable price point. So I ended up getting one. I picked up a red Epic Mysterium, and yeah, I was stoked. After coming from the FS7, the image I was able to instantly get was just really good. I'd go as far as saying it was the first camera that I was really stoked on the images I was getting straight out of camera. Compared to the Sony, it was very easy to use, no crazy menus. Shooting wise, it was a bit more what you see is what you get. So nice big touch screen, and because you were shooting in RAW, you weren't worrying about log or anything like that. And I think things just look great straight out of camera. At that point in time, when you'd shoot the footage, it would come into Premiere with the default look already applied, and there often wasn't much you really needed to do with it to get a nice image. And that camera served me great. I used it for a wide range of shoots, got a bunch of footage I was super happy with, was able to pick up a secondhand underwater housing for it, which I was also pretty stoked on, because suddenly I had this camera with all these frame rate and resolution options that I could take out in the water and capture some beautiful shots with at a pretty affordable price, because I got both of those things for a good deal on the used market. On a music video shoot, I think in 2020, that camera just suddenly died. Something inside just ran its course, I guess, which I don't think is super common on Reds. I haven't heard that happening a lot. But anyway, luckily, once again, I was insured, and the money I got back from that, I was able to put towards a Dragon, which was cheaper than what I got the Epic for originally. But you know, this is a few years later. And just because I already had all the accessories, the side handle, the water housing, viewfinder, media, etc., it just allowed me to keep using that camera, which I was super happy with. But at the same time, it was starting to present some limitations. When the Komodo was announced, I decided to get one of them. Just because I was pretty happy with Red from the Dragon, and before that the Epic that I'd been using for years prior to that, and just being able to buy a brand new Red system that had a lot of options and a bit more of a updated infrastructure with the media it took, the codecs it offered, things like that. And also the size, being able to use it on a gimbal and things like that. That's ended up being a really good buy. It's probably actually the main camera I use now. I use that for a variety of shoots. The price point for what it was is pretty good. My clients like it, the Red color science, the files I'm able to offer them, and financially, it's at a good price where I can more or less absorb it into my day rate. I kind of know my place in the market and the going rates, I'm pretty kind of confident on in my city, Sydney. If I was just to do some maths of me using this for a period of 3 or 4 years and then the resale value, the price this cost wasn't a lot to absorb over a couple of year period. So it's been a really good investment. In comparing the two cameras, funnily enough, I still think the Dragon has a superior image. I sometimes do shoots where I use them both, and I have the Komodo on a gimbal and this setup with a longer lens on a Cine Saddle or Easy Rig or something like that. And side by side, I really continue to like the images out of the Dragon more. This is staying on the shelf quite a bit these days, and One of the main reasons for that is a lot of my clients just prefer ProRes. The ProRes out of this is really easy to work with, good file for documentary, branded content, small kind of commercial stuff. I shoot 6K Red RAW when it's me doing the post on things, just because it's not that much bigger files and it's not heavy on my computer. I can edit it with no problems without having a crazy system or anything like that. So I still prefer Red RAW over ProRes generally, maybe except for things like interviews where it just might make more sense post-wise to be in ProRes. But these both shoot 6K RAW. This one here has way more frame rate options. And the price of these now is so cheap. For certain people, if you need the high frame rate, good resolution, nice cinematic image, these are great. Highlight roll off, dynamic range, just a bit of a filmic look. I mean, you look around online, you'll see there's people who actually prefer the older generation red sensors to the new ones. So my thoughts on Red in general as a company, they've put out some amazing products. They've always been a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of resolution and technology. Some might argue it's just a different business model to say how Arri works, who kind of really hold out on putting out a new higher resolution camera until they're confident that it's hitting their checklist of dynamic range, colors, everything like that at every different resolution, frame rate, etc. Red probably put theirs out a bit quicker and maybe go through less of that process. Basically, I think they're great cameras, but annoyingly enough, just they've almost been too far ahead because they haven't protected the camera's resale values, more or less. It's almost a better investment to buy a more expensive cinema camera because you know it will hold its value more. Red cameras are not a good investment, except maybe for, you know, the way I've done it. This is their cheapest camera. This is quite an old camera that's probably cheaper than this actually. Yeah, it is, it's way cheaper. So, you know, that's how I've been able to make it work. But definitely a lot of people would have been screwed over buying brand new Red cameras at different stages that just go down in value so quick. So I guess these are the things you got to keep in mind about Red, but I do really like them and it has been a great journey for me. I think they've got nice color science. I think they're good cameras to use. The Red RAW codec was pretty ahead of its time. I don't think that really had a comparable codec until Blackmagic released B-RAW. You know, there was other codecs around, but they weren't really available in affordable products and with a good compression, because definitely to me, from what I've used, the best RAW codecs have been the compressed RAW codecs. R3D, Blackmagic RAW, and Sony's XOCN, which is on the Burano, which I thought was really good. And there's Canon's as well. They have their own RAW codec, which I'm not as familiar with. I haven't used that in person too much. So to wrap things up, I've had pretty good experiences using Reds myself. But like I said, I think it's only because I got good entry points price-wise to their cameras. Good price secondhand, cheapest camera they've ever brought out, which has been a real day-to-day workhorse for me in the last few years and continues to be. I'm shooting with that all the time and getting good results. As far as future purchases, you know, they've come out with the Komodo X and the Raptor series of cameras. Both look great, but a little bit hard financially for me to justify at the moment. The Raptor, I think, is an amazing camera. However, it's a bit hard to justify spending 40 plus grand on a red camera system that you know is going to deteriorate pretty quickly value wise. So I guess you have to approach buying a red in maybe a bit of a different way. There's certain people who they really tick boxes for. So like people shooting natural history, I think red will continue to be untouched in the natural history documentary market because as far as I know, they're the only people actively requesting 8K content, which red are killing it up, especially with the frame rates they're offering. Other than that, I think the value proposition of red has changed a bit in the market as well. People are loving the FX6s, the Blackmagics, Canons, all these kind of affordable camera options so much that they're kind of happy just to stick with those and not pay a premium for red. But then when they are after that next step up in image quality, they're going for ARRI. There's not many productions where, if given the option between shooting on a Mini LF, Lexa 35, etc., versus a red, that they would pick the red unless they needed slow motion or something like that. Even though it's a great camera with a lot of dynamic range, really nice picture, it's nothing to do with that. But I think when people are looking to pay a premium for the image, they go for ARRI in my market, or these days at the higher end of things, the Venice, which is kind of the unexpected competitor to emerge in recent years. Kind of surprised, to be honest, that Sony is stealing market share from ARRI in the higher end of film production. And I think a lot of what I'm talking about just comes back to that kind of not being too much of a fanboy, fangirl about different camera brands, being open to what works best for you and your budget. For a lot of people starting out or working with smaller budgets, you just can't go past Blackmagics, especially because it comes with Resolve. And if you're going to be cutting it yourself, shooting on Blackmagic and learning how to grade in Resolve is just such a good bang for buck option. And when these were first so popular back in, that kind of 2014 to 2020 kind of period, they didn't have a competitor like that. Blackmagic's earlier cameras weren't really competing with red, but their recent ones definitely offering what I would call similar color science to red in very affordable camera systems that are good to use and give you really nice images. Anyway, let me know your thoughts about reds, or if you have any particular questions. Hope you enjoyed this little rant. Hooroo.